Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What is the Bible for? What are its connections with the paranormal? Is the Bible or the paranormal too negative?
Well, hello there, and welcome to the 405th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and those pretty unusual questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. So this evening, we're dealing with, what is for us a pretty unusual subject, which is kind of weird because we deal with a lot of unusual things here. The subject itself is the Bible. But there are plenty of paranormal connections here, so bear with us. But first, it's time for our weekly paranormal contest. So last week's question was, on what date was the first reported sighting of the Loch Ness Monster in the 20th century?
Well, Meg Myers of Northbridge, Massachusetts was the first to get that one right. July 22nd, 1933. On that fateful day, Mr. and Mrs. George Spicer were in their car traveling down the south shore of Loch Ness when a wide-bodied serpentine neck appeared, and it had a dead sheep in its mouth. There was lumbering across the road in front of them. So this sighting was not of the creature in the water; it was of the creature crossing the road.
Why did
both ways.
Why did the creature cross the road?
Exactly. Stop laughing. All right.
So this week's question is, this is my line, this week's question is, what hill in Quebec is often considered that province's most active paranormal hotspot? So get that right and win a copy of Footsteps in the Attic, my dad's most popular book. And we do welcome callers this evening. The number's locally or from Canada, 401-766-1240. Again, that's 401-766-1240.
Let's use that. Let's leave it at that, because
yes,
our guest is using the toll-free line, so nobody can call on that. Anyway, so we won't give you that number. But anyway, 401-766-1240. We have an unusual guest with an unusual subject this evening. Eliza Wood, not to be confused with Elijah Wood the Hobbit, is the author of Unafraid of Controversy, quote-unquote. Good. Known for suspense fiction that weaves history, terrorism, espionage, and adventure into complex social problems, Eliza has, quote, taken on the daunting task of re-editing the Bible in an effort to bring relevance and understanding across all religious lines, unquote. A social science graduate of Harvard University, Eliza is considered, quote, a social thought instigator on important topics requiring peaceful social progress, unquote. Residing in California, Eliza has lived and traveled extensively throughout the world, including living and working in Europe, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, and most recently was a resident of Bahrain. And before we begin, let me say that we have no religious agenda on this show. We are interested in depth and as much accuracy as can be attained. We are not tolerant of political correctness, spin, or any of that stuff. Whether it's in history, theology, or anything else, because it's all of profound relevance to what we so understatedly refer to as the paranormal. So Eliza's website is www.progressplanet.com.
So Eliza Wood, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, and it is wonderful to have you. So before we even get into the paranormal implications of, all of this, my dad and I are curious about a few things. So you are re-editing the Bible. What's that about?
Well, the Pacific Bible is a Bible I've been working on for a long time, and it really archives. It's a usual, familiar feeling Bible, and I'm sorry, I hear an echo. Is that happening there?
I'm sorry, I don't hear anything here.
Okay, perfect.
If you'd like, we can call you back on the regular line if there's a problem, but your audio sounds pretty good, actually.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So really by archiving about 400 verses from traditional Bibles that promoted things like rape, genocide, human sacrifice, slavery, things related to types of sexuality or property, the treatment of women as property, that type of a thing, or general subjugation of women, cannibalism, other problematic practices that are throughout the Bible. we really tried to create a version of the Bible that is more family-friendly, more contemporary, and more supportive of American values.
Well, all right. So maybe we have your abridged bio, but there's not really any mention of any formal education in theology, philosophy, biblical studies, anthropology, archaeology, ancient languages, history, literature, or anything whatsoever that's relevant to doing anything but read the Bible. So what qualifications do you have to do what you're talking about?
This was the way that I grew up. I had a very interesting family life. My dad had his doctorate in divinity from Yale, and my mom had her doctorate in doctorate in education from Harvard. And these were the topics of my family dinners. So these were discussions that we had.
Ours too, sometimes.
Exactly. And so, these were such familiar fields to me, and fields that I studied deeply throughout my own education. I did minor in archaeology, and I do speak 4 languages, including Hebrew. So there are, I do have some depth in related fields, but these were things that I learned over a period of about 30 years, and just constantly reading the Bible and stumbling as I read on verses that promoted something like genocide. And I would say, wow, how could we possibly have modern scripture and expect our people, and I mean not only Christians but Jews, anybody who has an organized faith system around the Bible, how can we promote peace and nonviolence if we still have so many problematic verses in the Bible?
All right. Can you give some examples of what you want to re-edit? I guess you already did in a way, but what are you going to do with, like, Sodom and Gomorrah?
Well, I had a wonderful opportunity to interview an expert on Sodom and Gomorrah, who is the founder of Religion Dispatches, which, really talks about if you really read the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, they aren't really related to what most modern people, or at least some of the more literal, more fundamentalist Christians take to be the sort of Levitical version of being so against homosexuality, and they were considered corruptions and other things, but. My take on sexuality in general in the Bible is that sexuality is practiced and preached in all modern synagogues and churches as and in a very different and more modern context than it did in biblical times, when the traditional family may have been a man, his wives, his concubines, and, his slaves, and a number of other people. So my take on all sexuality in the Bible is that it has to be, that we can't read, an ancient set of scriptures and interpret it and expect that our children will understand it and be in sort of equal footing relationships now. So we have some of those verses, of course, were some of those that were archived, and there's no way to, if somebody really wanted to take all the violence out of the Bible, it would be a very, very hard thing, as you probably know.
Well, okay. Did you have a question, man?
Well, it sounds like you're just talking about the Old Testament or the Torah, but what about the New Testament?
Well, the New Testament doesn't go a long way to overrule some of these practices, whether they were slavery or other things. And so, the New Testament is arguably much more peaceful.
Well, can I just interrupt you? I mean, you're right. As a matter of fact, I had an Old Testament professor who suggested that he had doubts whether the God of the Old Testament was really even the God of the New Testament because there seems to be such a difference. I mean, so I see your point, but on the other hand, are you not ignoring the idea? And I want to get into the paranormal aspect, so please be patient.
Okay, sure.
But it kind of two things bother me here. One is, at least the way you're describing it, you're not considering the historical context of the societies that the Bible was talking about. You're talking about all the way from just past the Sumerians, really, all the way up through the Roman Empire and the Hellenistic societies of that period. And I think to ignore the value of the historicity of that is a problem. And secondly, to apply 21st century principles and standards to people from the past, and my other hat is that of a historian. I've written a couple of books on history. It bothers me because it's not fair. You know, and I understand what you're trying to do, but can't you just write a separate book that sort of, it sounds as if you're doing violence to the historical facts, because there is dispute about the factual nature of the Bible, but the more archaeology that's done, the more it's found to be accurate in many ways. What say you on that? I mean, some of these things, a lot of these things are just in historical context. Are you going to take those out?
Well,
it'd be a real short book.
Exactly, and that's part of my point here. Well, the reason for it is that we have a growing trend, especially in our country. We have right now about 100 million people who believe the Bible is the absolute 100% Word of God that they should follow, and that it is inerrant and that sort of thing. Now, there are people like you who will take it in a historical context and say, well, that's the way things were. Isn't that interesting? And that isn't how we are now, and be able to make that distinction. And there are other people, and many of them, who absolutely believe that we should take all of our guidance and all of our modern practices from biblical lessons. And so therein lies the problem. So my recent book that just came out, which is Crisis of Faith, is a suspense novel that really deals with the fact that, modern Christian terrorist movements also draw.
Christian terrorist movements?
Well, when you think about the white supremacist groups.
But they don't call themselves Christians.
Well, some of them
most
do.
of them are atheists, actually.
No, some of them do call it, but I mean. Well, let me ask you this, Eliza. Have you already re-edited the Quran? Because I've counted, in reading it several times, I've counted at least 108 references that call Muslims to go to war with, quote, infidels to foster Islamic world rule. And some actually go as far as saying to lop off fingers and heads. Yeah. Have you re-edited the Quran first?
The Quran is an interesting other scripture, and there are many other religions that have tons of violence in their scripture.
Yeah, the Mahabharata, the Gita,
exactly. Many religions can justify violence. Now, there's a guy named Philip Jenkins, head of religion, I think, at Penn State, a marvelous guy who wrote a book called Laying Down the Sword, why we can't ignore, let me read you the title, Why We Can't Ignore the Bible's Violent Verses. And his argument, his comparison, what it is a big comparison of the Bible to the Quran in terms of violence. And he really goes a long way into showing that, well, the Bible is a much longer book than the Quran, and it has like a 7-to-1 ratio of violence. The huge difference there is that most of the biblical enemies in our Bible are no longer around. And so they're these like ancient groups that you're reading about, and so you take them in much more of a historical context. Whereas the Quran still has, Muslims really pitted against groups, religious groups,
that's my point, yeah.
That are still around, like Jews and, Christians and others. And so, and so it's like they're still fighting these battles. And so, there are some real challenges when you get into many scriptures.
Well, it just strikes me, with all due respect, as kind of a shallow approach. But let's move on to what other things. Maybe we can have some other forum in which to discuss that. But okay, what do you believe the purpose of religion is?
Oh, I think a religion is really a medium for culture and for just a wonderful perspective on the guideposts that we give ourselves in society and the context in which we understand our lives. In the book that I was just talking about, Crisis of Faith, which is a suspense fiction book that I worked on, it is extremely respectful of all modern religions. And religions just have the power to do such tremendous good in the world. And if you think about, where we are as a society with them versus where we would be without them, I mean, they just are so powerful in terms of their potential for goodness and the reality of the goodness that they bring.
All right, we got some talking points from your people, and Ben, if you wanted to, we just sort of wanted to go through some of those and then get into some of the paranormal aspects.
Hold on, let me find them. Oh,
okay.
Here they are.
Yeah.
All right. So as you, my father just said, we receive talking points from your people, and our people talk to your people, and your people talk to our people. So you say religion is supposed to inspire peace and positive communal conduct. So what gave you that idea?
Religion has very little to do with that, frankly. But go ahead.
Well, religion is a wonderful mechanism for people to collaborate and interpret what Scripture means and translate that into all kinds of wonderful outreach programs and support programs for their communities. And it's a vehicle for goodness beyond what you might think. So by comparison, think about like the agnostics or the atheists who don't have an overarching organization. So they don't have, in some ways, the power to do a whole lot of good.
All right, so it's sort of a social service. I don't know. Again, I think that's not our experience at all. Our view of religion and science, for that matter, that they are both sort of children of the paranormal. In other words, and I'm going back to its remotest beginnings, they both resulted, in my opinion, from people's desire to explain things. Now, in religion's case, one of the main things they wanted to explain was contact with what they considered supernatural beings. What those were or are is another subject, but you don't seem to consider that. The result was really shamanism, and then came the clergy, who were sort of administrators of the dogma, and then institutionalization. And then religion was used for social cohesion and all that kind of good stuff. But essentially, it reaches to the core of what the human beings are, tells us about ourselves. The Bible, in my opinion, is one of the books that unveils our nakedness and the very faults that we have that we need to learn from, past or present, seem to be what you want to take out. Terrible as they may be, they teach a lesson, and we hopefully will learn from it. We haven't learned an awful lot, but maybe we're getting there. It's supposed to be the human response to contact with the divine.
Well, it may supposed to be that, but there are plenty of moms in the world like me who don't want our kids reading verses that say, it's okay to have a slave, it's okay to beat your slave.
Where does it say it's okay to have a slave other than reporting that there are slaves, or how slaves should act in the context of their societies?
Well, if you look at verses, like if you look at Leviticus 19:20, you can see that it's okay to rape your slave if you then go sacrifice an animal. And you can see verses, many. I mean, there's something like 1,315 verses in the Bible. Some of them saying it's okay to kidnap and rape an enemy woman, or to obliterate an entire village, but just save the virgin girls for the spoils.
All right. I see your point. All right, you made your point, but I would need to look those up, and I need to read them in Hebrew in order to see what they really are, because you're aware that the English translations, every single one is really pretty awful, of both the Old Testament and the New Testament. So, and as a matter of fact, I would find it difficult working with the text because we don't know what the original words actually were. I've actually seen things like the Codex Alexandrinus, and the ink leaking through a page turned an omicron into a theta, and therefore totally changed the doctrine of Jesus Christ in one of the books of Tim. I mean, this is the kind of thing that happened. I've seen documents where the ancient scribe wrote, "Why did you change what this originally said?" to his fellow scribe, and we don't know what you can go bonkers just trying to figure it out.
Oh, it's so true. I just read that there was a verse in Romans that for 600 years had one of the apostles named Junius, which was Junia, which was a female name, and then after 600 years it starts appearing as Junius, a male name. So
yeah,
by changing like one letter.
Eliza, sorry to interrupt, but we have a caller.
Please.
So, hello, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Yeah, good evening, Paul and Ben and Eliza. How are you?
Good evening. You have a question?
Not too bad.
Well, I have a pertinent comment. I'm sure you're both aware of the man named Richard Dawkins.
Yes.
The avowed atheist. From his book, The God Delusion, just a paragraph what he says about the Bible. He says, the Bible is not evil, just weird, as you would expect of a chaotically cobbled together anthology of disjointed documents, composed, revised, translated, distorted, and improved by hundreds of anonymous authors, editors, and copyists, unknown to us and mostly unknown to each other, spanning 9 centuries.
Eliza, comment?
Beautiful, beautiful quote, and thank you so much for that comment. You know, until about 100 years ago, there were a lot of people who treated the Bible as an ancient collection of scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been in this past 100 years or so where, people have taken this collection and considered it one authoritative, book from God that directs everything. And if you look at the numerous contradictions in the Bible, it's much easier to take it in the context that you just mentioned.
And on the topic of religion, I many years ago I used to study Rosicrucianism, and they said religion is not an open study of life, but is rather a perpetuation of certain concepts of life, as expounded by one or more individuals. It attempts to set standards of morality and behavior upon the basis of these concepts. So religion is mainly a power grab and a disinformationist vehicle.
Well, it's certainly been misused. I'm sorry, go ahead, Elijah.
I've been studying a lot, too, about new religions and religions that may not even be based on the Bible. They could be based on a work of fiction, such as the big, there's something called the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which is a phenomenal group that, has based theirs. And I've interviewed the Doodly Lama, who, I don't know if you're familiar with the Dudism religion, which is based on a movie.
Yeah, The Big Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski. And so they're a Jediism, which is a whole group of people. So there are really interesting groups who are considering themselves real modern religions and believe that these works are as valid and inspirational as some of the others.
I don't mean to interrupt you here, but we have to take a commercial break, and then we're going to try to kind of work the paranormal in here after the break.
Okay, sure.
Everybody stay with us. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. Stay with us.
The reindeer games are here. Listen for your chance to call in and play the reindeer games here on ON 1240. If your reindeer comes in first place in the race, your name goes in the prize bucket 5 times. If your reindeer comes in second place, it goes in 3 times. And if it comes in third, it goes in 1 time. Now, to better your chances of picking the right reindeer, you need to pick up a tip sheet at one of our sponsors. Simon Chevrolet, 114 Porton Drive, Woonsocket. Tip sheets are in the service department. Dean Bank, 2 locations, 411 Pulaski Boulevard, Bellingham, and 8 Main Street, Blackstone. Tip sheets are in the main lobbies. Lincoln Mall, George Washington Highway in Lincoln. Tip sheets are near the Santa Claus location. And the WOON Studios, 985 Park Avenue, Woonsocket. Tip sheets are at the reception desk. We'll award prizes on Christmas Eve. The grand prize is a 2-night stay at the Midtown Hotel in Boston. Second prize is a 1-night stay at the International Inn and Suites on Cape Cod. And third prize is lift tickets to Wachusett Mountain. Reindeer games all December long on your holiday station, ON 1240 WOON, Woonsocket Radio.
And here we are again, and our guest is I keep saying Elijah Wood, I'm sorry, Eliza Wood. We're talking about rewriting the Bible. She's the editor of the Pacific Bible, and we've been talking about Bible stuff. Let's try to get the paranormal back into the show here. Now, of course, the Bible, as we said before, has lots of paranormal implications and connections and hints and interesting sorts of stuff about that subject. Is there anything there are a lot of unpleasant things that have paranormal implications, Eliza. Have you done anything about for example, the Gerasene demoniac, where the pigs all run and jump in the water and are killed and all this business, and things like Sodom and Gomorrah? I mean, what is your opinion on that sort of thing? Does that have any use in your world?
Well, I do a lot on my website, the Progress Planet website, with weird religion.
I couldn't get the site. Are you sure it's up? Because we have it on our site with a link, and we're going to give you a chance to talk about it and your book before the end of the show.
Yeah, it's progressplanet.com.
Okay, yeah, because I couldn't. It wouldn't come up for me. I don't know. Maybe it was just some kind of.
The internet's been very sketchy lately.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
There's a whole section on weird religion that I write about, and a whole section on science and religion, and pop culture and religion, and what is God and world religion. And some of sometimes I write about things like astrology and religion, or superstitions and religion, like why do we believe, and things like that. And so those are some of the areas that I try to to really write about. Recently, I wrote a lot about, for example, like things like Scientology or little cults and what is a cult, and that type of thing.
All right. Well, I'm trying to get some examples here. Let me give you another example. The pillar of fire from Exodus. Some of our colleagues interpret that as a UFO. It supposedly protected the Israelites in the desert and then pancaked the Egyptians. Is that not acceptable?
Oh, I don't know. I recently read that I recently wrote a 3-part blog about various people who were claiming to be the Messiah. And first I did Christians who have claimed to be the Messiah, and then I did Jews, and then I did Muslims, and then I sort of did other. And in the other category, there was a whole UFO theme to it. So it certainly could be relevant.
Well, the thing is, are you taking out the God not being nice to the Egyptians?
Oh, well, the Pacific Bible is a very separate project, and it's a big, long initiative to create a more modern, family-friendly Bible that's consistent with our American values of equality and freedom and that type of thing.
Well, there are two entirely different Americas right now. Which one are you serving?
Which two are you talking about?
Well, if this were regional, we'd be looking at another civil war. Anyway, okay, that's not paranormal. I'm sorry. Let's back up.
Just stick to the paranormal. It's the point of the show.
Yes, Ben, you're right. You're absolutely right. Okay, the entire issue of demonology, as it's so, I don't like the term, but it's called that. The issue of possession and all this business that's happening in the Bible on several levels. Is that? As I'm trying to see here if you're going to, or if you have sort of taken out the paranormal context here, or what's your interpretation is of the paranormal events and what you might do with them in the Pacific Bible. For example, the ascension of Christ or the demon situations.
None of that has gone anywhere. That's all there. And the truth is that what I tried to do with the Pacific Bible was really create a Bible that's pulled into compliance with modern human rights standards. So it really doesn't get into, in fact, there's a section in the book that I just wrote, Crisis of Faith, all about the miracle. And if you think about a miracle or any of the paranormal type things, it's very, very, prevalent throughout the Bible.
So those are good things.
Well, they're very interesting, and they certainly point to, if not paranormal, a belief in certainly miracles and things that happen for reasons caused by God in the Bible that haven't happened since.
All right, let's go through. Haven't happened since.
You haven't heard that God came down and parted the water or caused a victory in a battle, or once in a while we do hear, for example, that healing and particularly health-related outcomes.
We see that all the time. When I was in the military, I was caught in an avalanche. Something pulled me by the arm out from under 8 feet of snow. Had that not occurred, this conversation would not be taking place. I think miracles happen every day.
Exactly. So those types of things we do hear about. One of the blogs I just recently wrote about was the near-death experiences.
Sure.
And, the kinds of visions that people have and the consistency of that. And what does that mean? Or angels in our midst. Those types of things.
Yeah, what's your interpretation of that sort of thing? I mean, are you a believer in anything other than sort of social justice, whatever that means? I mean, do you have a commitment to a particular point of view, that goes a little deeper? It seems to me that social justice comes from your commitment to a deeper belief. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
It's very true. I have a deep commitment.
Yeah, I don't mean to pry, but
to human rights standards and that type of thing, and all things good for the equality of people and nonviolence. But the truth is, I have seen many miracles in my own life, and including a really miraculous healing. I have a son who had a terrible disability, who has been one of those rare medical miracles that I every day of my life thank God for. So those types of things have touched me personally.
Well, that's a wonderful thing to hear, yeah. On the issue of the origins of the human race, religion, and even, I suppose, the Bible, discussions sometimes come up on this show about interference from somewhere or someone else.
Whether it be aliens, us from the future, us from the past, us from parallel universes, or other creatures from parallel universes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it all comes up now and then, and we have our own position on that and whatever. But what have you considered that at all as far as the origin of some of the unpleasant stuff in the Bible?
I have to tell you, I really started with the project of looking at the Bible and saying, a lot of people lean on this, and how can we really promote the positive lessons and the positive things that are in this Bible, and sort of mitigate and archive some of the stuff that isn't serving any modern purposes anymore. No one's teaching, for example, rape or slavery or any of that. So I really didn't go into a lot of the.
Well, I don't know. There's an awful lot of that still going on in the world.
Yeah, there's tons of it, but you don't hear it in your sermon on Sunday.
Generally not.
And you don't have your kids coming home from Sunday school learning lessons about the fact that, it's okay to have slaves and stuff. I mean, they have sort of scrubbed out what they don't want to promote anymore. It's just that these stuff really, it still is in the Bible.
So you believe the Bible should be a living thing that's kind of changing all the time?
I do.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Do you have any other, Ben? Do you have any further questions?
Wait a second. There was actually a point to this question, but it somehow got diluted into something else. I was actually going to say something, but I can't remember.
Well,
I remember now. So why do you think all this paranormal stuff, if they weren't acts of God, just other random things, why were they put into the Bible?
Well, she didn't say she didn't believe there were
No,
acts of
I'm
God.
just asking why they would
Yeah,
be.
all right.
Like, is there some sort of social implication, or?
I don't know that anybody could answer that question. The truth is, how do we know why anything was put into the Bible, or why do people believe, December 21st is the end of the world, or any of the things that we do believe? I think people have a need to understand why they're here and what they're supposed to do here and where they go next and how to interpret the death that's around us and that type of thing and how to behave toward one another. And so those are struggles that people have had since the beginning of time.
Well, that's what we believe was the origins of both science and religion, really.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before we go any further, I want to, because we have a tendency to burn up the time here, I want to give you a chance to talk about the book and the website and whatever else you may be working on.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, the website, the Progress Planet website, if you go to progressplanet.com, there's a beautiful copy of my children's book, which is free. And I like to tell people about it, so go there. It's called The Tale of Queen Jehan and the Three Kingdoms, and it's a beautifully illustrated book that teaches sort of intercultural, interracial, and ethnic cooperation. And it does it through the metaphor of these three kingdoms, the human kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the reptile kingdom. And so that's a fun book, and that's free on the website. There's all categories of things you can read about on the website, politics and religion and weird religion, and with a lot of interviews we've conducted with experts. And it's just a fascinating contemporary look at where is religion and what is religion. And then there's a book that came out October 19th, which is my book, my flagship fiction novel, which is suspense, and it's controversial, and it's called Crisis of Faith. And that book, people can go and actually download the first 4 chapters of. And, it is a fast-moving story. It's a present-day terrorist attack on Manhattan, on a mosque, where several young women are killed, and it prompts the president to take the issue of religiously motivated terrorism more seriously. So it sets up a dynamic where the most powerful man in the world has to challenge the most powerful book in the world.
Well, that sounds interesting. Well, okay, great. I wanted to ask one question about we've looked back, now maybe look ahead. The idea of prophecies in the Bible, and of course, I'm not just thinking of Revelation, which was in the 4th century was considered very, very carefully before they put it into the canon of the Bible, or the Council of Nicaea. It was kind of too weird for a lot of them, and they weren't sure it really served the purpose of the book, which, at least the New Testament, which was supposed to be exposition on salvation, I don't know. But in any case, what is your opinion of prophecy? Have you edited any of those? Because a lot of those are not very pleasant, and they are consistently misinterpreted by just about everybody. So what say you?
The prophecies in the Bible, it just makes for some really, really interesting reading, and it goes to that whole area of the great beyond, what we can really understand. Now, Revelation in particular, it's through a lens of violence or genocide, would predict something like a genocide of 2 billion people. So do I like it there? No. Did Martin Luther like it there when he edited his version of the Bible? No. So it's not, and then when you read someone like Elaine Pagels, who wrote a new book.
Oh, one of my favorite authors, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And when she wrote her new book on Revelation explaining the political backdrop of what it really meant and a different way to interpret it, it's more understandable. So there are things like that that I struggle with, along with hundreds of millions of Americans, and wondering, what you're supposed to learn from it and what you're supposed to do differently and all of that. So, but certainly none of those verses. The only verses in the Pacific Bible that we archived into a different section involved things like slavery, rape, punishments where a father would have to eat a son, or a son would have to eat a parent, or
I'm just not
like,
familiar. I was in the seminary for 10 years. I don't accept much of but I never ran into that.
Well, I can direct you.
Can you please? Because I'd like to see it, particularly in Hebrew. But all right. Well, in any case, if you could drop me an email, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, that I would love to do.
Sure, please do. Okay, the issue of and again, there's separate issues here between the Old Testament prophecies, which personally I do not think were meant for thousands of years in their future. I think they're pretty much talking about the Roman destruction of the place in 70 A.D. and thereabouts. Same thing with Revelation. I don't know. What do you make of people who think that the end times are here? I mean, people have been saying that for 1,000 years. I mean, maybe they are. It could be any. I don't know.
Very true. So very. Oh my gosh, Mount Vesuvius in 79 A.D. The plagues and the fires, Halley's comet.
Right, 79. Right.
Jehovah's Witnesses prophecy with the Christ Kingdom, and Pat Robertson's prediction from 1982.
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate. There's just to go on and on and on. And for a while, I attended a very fundamentalist Christian school for 3 years where we learned the Bible by rote. And that particular school predicted the end of the world at one point, that, we were ready for the rapture. And honestly, I don't see any end to that. There's this doomsday prediction now for December 21st, and there are truly many people who are expecting the world to end.
Oh yeah, people in France and Spain are headed for the Pyrenees, and not all of them, I hope.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is kind of what bothers me, has always kind of bothered me about a more fundamentalist interpretation, is that, there's too much of the, I've been a failure in my life, or this or that, but at least I'm better than those SOBs, the ones who were not, quote, not saved, unquote. That bothers me.
Well, that's kind of the trend I was talking about when there's a growing trend of literalism in the Bible, and a lot of the growth of the part of the evangelical movement and the speed at which it's growing and how it's preaching is certainly contributing to more and more discrimination. And instead of Christianity becoming more peaceful and more accepting and more loving, it's becoming much more exclusive, like we're better than you, or you're going to die and
it's not just Christianity. I mean, I hear that out of the mouths of people of many different religions. My dog's better than your dog, or my God in this case.
Exactly. Well, I just interviewed a guy who has a new film out called Hellbound. Have you guys heard about that one?
No.
Oh, cool film. And it talks to some of these religious groups who are certain the end is near, and certain that certain of us are going to hell. And it shows the spectrum of Christianity and how some Christians, are believing that hell is maybe it's a temporary place, or maybe it's a smaller form of punishment. Some are believing, it's
purgatory.
Oh, eternal damnation, or there's a whole wide range of things. But there are many, many people who are certain today which ones of us are not going to be making it through the pearly gates.
That's very arrogant, in my opinion.
Well, most of them don't have any sort of theological training.
Well, I think some of the worst ones have theological training. Well, one of the things that you might find interesting, Eliza, is our subject for several shows in the past 6 months has been poltergeists, all right? And I have had some pretty knockdown, drag-out experiences with them in 42 years of doing this stuff. And it's you encounter ones who frequently will quote the Bible. And what are we dealing with here? Now, I don't believe they're demons or servants of Satan. They're life forms that they're part of nature. They're parasitical, and we get into that in a lot of the shows. But in any case, whatever they are, one of the buttons they use seems to be the Bible from time to time. And I'm thinking particularly of the one case I'm not quite this old, 1817 to 1821, which was the Bell Witch case in Tennessee. And one of the things this poltergeist did, or actually there were, I think, 4 of them, would quote not only the Bible, in a beautiful speaking voice. It would quote word for word every sermon from every church in Robertson County. So I think that those who are arrogant about these things should think of that, because they're just the people who would consider these demons. So, again, perhaps another bit of a paranormal connection there.
Exactly.
Right. So, okay, well, Eliza, thank you so much for being with us. It's very interesting. I don't agree with what you're doing, but that's my personal opinion. I think it ought to be left alone, but hey, what the heck do I know? Any further comment, Ben?
No, I'm good. It was very interesting having you on.
And please drop me an email with some of those references. Maybe we can get a little dialogue going there. If you don't have you have our show address, I'm sure. It's on the website, and your publicist can give it to you, because she's a very dear friend of ours. Well, very good to talk to you, and we'll be following your progress.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.
Very unusual guest. Okay. Well, we have time for a few emails, maybe, or at least one or two anyway. So let's deal with a question. This one is from Courtney Milligan in New York City.
All right, so Courtney writes to us. Love you, Paul and Ben. Well, thank you. There is a lot of talk about portals, and I have even heard you talk about them on Coast to Coast. I know parasites and other beings can come through them. I hear you talk about escaping through them, but can people get sucked into them without wanting to, and do you know about any cases where that happened? Oh, yeah, of course.
There's a lot of very interesting questions in there. Actually, Courtney, I've actually tried that. I'm thinking in particular of, several cases where audible, sounds would come from an unseen source. We talk very often about the Pomfret, Connecticut case of the Village of Voices case of 1971, where a bunch of us stood there and we heard the ox cart driver going by, and a number of other things that we couldn't see. And I have found that if you run toward those sounds, you get to where you think it is, and it's just over there. Or you run over there, and it's just over there. And I, as far as I know, never got sucked into a parallel world because of that, but it sort of made me think of Einstein's contention that space and time are curved. Because, and that's just what kind of made it make sense. You can't quite get there from here, so to speak, when it comes to these things. Portals, for those who might not be familiar with the term in the paranormal context, really are supposed to be doors between, most people consider it, this world and the spirit world or whatever, but we don't believe in the spirit world in that sense. We believe there are many, many, many other worlds, perhaps an infinite number, in the quantum physics notion of parallel worlds. In other words, we think that's what explains the paranormal. The worlds impinge on each other, and we see their inhabitants who are perfectly alive, probably perfectly physical. They're not spirits, going about their lives, and sometimes there's contact, and that's the way we kind of see it. So the whole portal thing kind of has bothered me a little bit, because my vision and my experience of paranormal phenomena is when worlds seem to overlap. Not so much doors between them, but an overlapping where the two worlds kind of blend. But there really do seem to be portal areas that seem to be kind of special in this context, and you can travel back and forth. Now I know it's not that easy, but and I always worry about that with Ben, because he will sometimes go into meditative states, or sometimes something deeper than that, and there have actually been people who reportedly have disappeared in that situation, and I don't want to see that happen to my son, but what we are aware of in our files are records of people who have been walking or running, or have been in a group, or have been well seen by other people, and have simply disappeared. Sometimes they have been found in other countries at a time when they would never have had a chance to traverse the distance. There was one case in Mexico City where the one in Mexico City was well recorded from the 1600s, of a soldier who was walking his post in Mexico City and literally disappeared, suddenly found himself in the Philippines, which had only just been colonized by Spain. And the people there noticed his uniform was wrong, because apparently each of the colonies, they had their own instinctive insignia and things of this kind. And he told them he'd just been in Mexico City. They thought he was a flake, but sure enough, inquiries which of course took a long time to do because of the distances, it turned out that the guy was correct, and they had considered him a deserter, but then there he was, and they figured it was some kind of miracle, and he went back to Mexico City and kept walking his post. But there are much more modern contexts of these things. There are reports of people who are driving their cars. The car goes into a fog, and they come out hundreds of miles away.
What about the old man who disappeared, and then he showed up 30 years later or something, got hit by a car?
Yeah, that's happened too. There have been people who have appeared, and I'm aware of several cases from the Tokyo International Airport. I can't exactly remember the dates of them, but they were in modern times since the 60s, in the 50s or 60s, when people would appear there with no passports from countries that never existed, coinage and money from the same countries that never existed in our time anyway, our world, clothing made of textiles nobody could identify. In both cases, they went crazy or were put away in psychiatric hospitals and nobody knew what to do. In one case, person was killed. And this sort of thing does happen. So these portals, if that's what this is, do tend to wreak some kind of havoc from time to time. So that's the best way we can answer that, Courtney. You want to do one more here, Ben?
It doesn't have to be so long.
No, I'm looking for here's a very short.
Okay, thank
All
you.
Right. This is from Martin in Oakland County,
now if we have
Missouri.
more than 5 minutes,
Michigan,
I would just say, let's go for it, but we only have 5 minutes.
Oakland County, Michigan.
Okay, so, dear Paul and Ben, I look forward to your podcast every week. I do not agree with everything you say, but I think you have a really important insight that will take us to a new understanding, whatever that means.
Well, thank you.
I
see.
I am wondering whether you know of any ghost hunting teams. I know you do not like the term, that use your theories in their investigations, and what is the result?
Oh, that's the second time we've been asked that lately.
No, someone actually used the theories.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
That was an email from a few weeks ago where someone actually used the theories and they thought we were full of crap, and then they just decided, oh, hey, we're going to use your theories, and then they had a horrifying result or something.
Well, I hope that didn't happen.
No, I mean for them.
Oh, no, they had a good result.
They had a good result,
okay.
Yes, but it was bad in the long term.
They didn't disappear through any portals or anything?
No,
okay.
No.
Good. Well, certainly, Martin, this is a question that does arise. A lot of groups, and I suspect sometimes maybe they just want to be on the show. We don't allow a lot of them on the show. We have tried to have more serious people. Although there are serious people out there doing this, and perhaps I'm being unfair at times. But some have told us that they have been using our theories and methods, and I don't really know about that because we are not all that open certainly with our theories, but not necessarily with our methods. Because, and someone actually wrote, that's what I'm thinking of. Someone wrote in and asked if I was going to write a book about the theories and methods.
No, there was another one too that was we use your theories and methods and investigation.
Yeah.
And I was just wait a second, what? We don't even talk about our methods.
Well, when we talk to people who say they do that, they strike me as really, they still don't get it. Really. They don't understand the multiverse theories. They still think they're dealing with spirits, and it's I don't know. People just cannot seem to escape.
Well, it's like trying to speak a new language. I mean, cut them a little slack.
Well, but it is. It is and it's a whole different understanding from what we're used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's like trying to learn ancient Sanskrit in a week.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's the thing. So we do know of some groups that do that. I do not intend to write a book on it because we do not encourage people to go out and get involved in this. If the paranormal comes to you, that's one thing. But if you go out seeking these things, they can be very dangerous. You can wreck lives, including your own, and it is not worth it. It's not like bird watching, as we're always saying. So, okay.
Oh, wait, no. Huh.
2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Producer. Ben's doing a great job as a producer here too.
Oh,
okay.
You.
So anyway, let's do our announcements, and please, if you have any further questions on these things, write in, send us emails. There's a form on our site, behindtheparanormal.com, and there's also Paul at behindtheparanormal.com and Ben at behindtheparanormal.com. Okay.
But don't feel like I don't talk to you because I don't get the emails back. I'll get to it. My email's messed up, so. So anyway, now continuing, watch for news of the Necronomicon Providence, the H.P. Lovecraft convention set for August 23rd through the 25th, 2013 in Providence, and we'll be keeping you updated on that.
Okay. Now, again, BehindTheParanormal.com. Check out future guests, past guests, and there are over nearly 450 podcasts on that. So many thanks to our producer, as I say, Ben himself. And next week, December 17th, we will take the hour ourselves to talk about paranormal experiences of the saints, kind of in a canted way, kind of maybe related to what we said tonight. And some of the incidents attested to by witnesses are pretty spectacular.
All right. So on a regular CBS edition on December 16th, when my dad and I will welcome author M.L. Curry to talk about the psychic experiences that accompany grief.
Okay, so
if you have any questions for us, as my dad mentioned, you can get those emails in now at paul@behindtheparanormal.com or ben@behindtheparanormal.com.
And we leave you this evening with a thought from the great psychologist and student of the paranormal, Dr. Carl Jung. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness, unquote.
It'd end now, but we still have like 20 seconds to kill.
20 whole seconds? What are we going to do?
I don't know. Maybe we could sword fight, duel, or
yes.
We could sing a song.
Okay, well anyway, maybe you could do the
honors?
The farewell.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us on our incredibly strange journey and sailing with us. We will see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.